I am so very honored to be able to introduce to you the country's Senate Republican leader, who was first elected to that position unanimously by his colleagues in 2006, only the second Kentuckian to lead his party in the Senate. Senator McConnell's past positions are just as distinguished, voted unanimously by his colleagues as a Republican leader in the 110th and 111th Congress, and the Majority Whip in the 108th and 109th. Also during 1998 and 2000 election cycles, he served as chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. A graduate with honors from the University of Louisville, where he served as student body president, by the way, he received his law degree from the University of Kentucky College of Law. Does that make you a Louisville fan or a Kentucky fan? Okay. I have got my first no comment today, so. But there he served as president of the Student Bar Association. So you can see his leadership started at a very youthful age. His taste for Washington began as he worked as an intern on Capitol Hill for Senator John Sherman Cooper, followed by serving as legislative assistant to Senator Marlowe Cook and deputy assistant attorney general to President Gerald Ford. Now, a little bit closer to home, we may know the senator as he served as judge executive for Jefferson County from 1978 until his term in the Senate began in 1985. Senator McConnell currently serves as senior member of the Appropriations, Agriculture, and the Rules Committee. Please join me in welcoming back to Bardstown in Nelson County our U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Kim. I appreciate the kind introduction. Kind of hated for her to stop. It sounded pretty good to me. And seeing my friend the judge and the mayor here reminds me of, since Kim mentioned my local government days, reminds me of a guy named Frank Burke, who was mayor of Louisville years ago, and he ran for mayor promising to have a listed phone number, as if that were kind of unusual. I'm sure you'd never consider not having a listed phone number. To underscore how accessible he would be. And so he won the election, and shortly after he took office, the phone rang at 2 a.m. in the morning. And it was somebody who had imbibed slightly too much of Bardstown's favorite product. And he said, "Mayor, is that you?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "By golly, you do have a listed phone number, and I just wanted you to know there's a pothole in front of my house that I want you to get fixed." And the mayor dutifully wrote down the guy's name and address and phone number, and tried to salvage what was left of the evening for sleep, went to the office the next morning, ordered his director of the Works Department to go out and fix the potholes. They were going to have a responsive administration. "Call me when you've done it." So the director called him back, said, "We fixed the pothole." The mayor went home that night, set his alarm for 2 a.m. He called him up and said, "There, you SOB, we fixed your pothole." Now, I know, Judge and Mayor, you've never been tempted to do anything like that. Yeah. And it's great to see my friend David Floyd, who's done a terrific job of representing you all in Frankfort. Thank you, David, for being here today. I know they're about to be or in session. I hope you didn't miss anything important. And it's always terrific to be in Nelson County. What I thought might be the most useful thing to do today, I know this is a largely Democratic county, so I go forward with some fear and trepidation, but I'm going to give you, however, you've been voting right in my elections, for which I want to thank you. I want to give you my take on where I think the country is, knowing full well that you can get the other side from someone else. And so I think a good place to start is what we learned in grammar school, which is that the person who gets the most votes wins and gets to make policy. And unlike horseshoes or racing, there's no prize for second place. Only those who win elections get to make policy. As we learned last night in Iowa, sometimes it can be really close. So what happened to my side of the political aisle in 2006 and 2008? We had two very bad elections in a row. And in early 2009, we had a brand new president sitting on a 65 or 70% approval rating. He had a 40-seat majority in the U.S. House, which is a pretty good majority. And when they quit counting votes in the last Senate race in Minnesota, they had 60 votes in the Senate. For those of you who are not political junkies, 51 is a majority in the Senate, but 60 gives you control because most of the things, not everything, but most of the things we do in the Senate require 60 votes. So this is about as good as it gets. They had a complete hammerlock on the federal government. The president's chief of staff at the time, who's now, interestingly enough, the mayor of Chicago, famously said, "A crisis is a terrible thing to waste." What did he mean? Well, he meant that all the pieces of the puzzle were in place and they were going to go for it. The crisis he was referring to was the economic situation, but what he was really talking about was the opportunity to do things that they could not have achieved over the last few decades because there was either inconveniently a Republican in the White House or a Republican Congress. There was some problem that prevented going forward with the agenda they really wanted to do. So they pulled out their wish list, and we saw it all on full display for 2 years, during which the president actually owned the Congress, got everything he wanted. An almost $1 trillion stimulus bill, the takeover of American health care, the nationalization of the student loan program, running the debt up 35%. We now have a debt the size of our economy. People over at the NLRB trying to get rid of the secret ballot in the labor union elections. People over at the Federal Communications Commission trying to take over the Internet. In short, by any objective standard, an explosion of government across the board. Washington, by the way, is a boom town. I didn't ask you what the unemployment is in Nelson County, but in Washington it's hardly there at all. We're awash in new federal employees that your grandchildren will have to pay the Chinese back for. We are the only genuine boomtown in America with all this growth of government. In addition to that, if any of you are in the financial services industry, they also changed the whole way we approach the financial services industry, which has driven the price up for virtually every product. I have a friend who's in the mortgage business in San Antonio. He told me the name of the bill was Dodd-Frank, that post-Dodd-Frank it cost him $1,000 more per mortgage to deal with the regulatory imposition in the wake of that bill. So it's hit the financial services industry on Main Street pretty hard. The big guys in New York, of course, can afford all of this. So it's created kind of a Main Street lending problem by this massive overreach. So, after 2 years of this, and there were days when I wondered, and when John Boehner, who was then the leader of the minority in the House, wondered how the American people felt about this explosion of government. Well, we had an indication last November as the American people issued a national restraining order. Please stop. And so there was a mid-course correction, and the American people did once again what they've frequently done since World War II, which is to restore divided government. To restore divided government. I know it's counterintuitive, but some of you are probably thinking, well, with divided government, nothing ever happens. But actually, I can give you 4 examples of really significant things that occurred in the last couple of decades when we did have divided government. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill in 1983 raised the age for Social Security. Still kicking in all these years later, but gradually raised the age for Social Security. It's something that both sides knew had to be done to save Social Security for a generation, and they did it. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill also did the last comprehensive tax reform. When Reagan came to office, the top rate was 70. It went down to 28 when he left office. That needed to be done. We're going to have to do that again, by the way, because 25 years later, the rates have gone up, the preferences have come back. We have the same kind of morass we had before. Bill Clinton and the Republicans did welfare reform. A very, very significant step in the right direction. And Bill Clinton and the Republican Congress actually balanced the budget in the late 90s.